the most toxic part of the industry is the industry. It is not the outside of the industry, it is the inside of the industry. These are catty, judgmental, mean, fierce bullies. And they are so toxic that they break people one at a time.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Uncensored podcast with Brittni De La Mora, where I share culturally relevant topics from a Christian perspective. Make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and comment below to engage in this video because I will meet you in the comment section. And today I am bringing you a very special guest. I am so excited to bring on Lisa Ann. You may know her from the adult film industry, or you might know her from Sirius Satellite Radio. She's hosting a comedy show. She's done some sports shows. I mean, she really is a woman who wears many hats. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Brittni. Thanks for bringing me on for this conversation.
Of course. Thank you. So I want to talk a lot about, the mental health crisis in the porn industry. I want to talk about your experience in the industry today. So let's get right to it. You were in the adult film industry for how long were you in the industry?
Almost 30 years.
Okay, 30 years. That's a long time.
Seems like a really long time. There were
Yeah.
some breaks in that time, but I was always involved in the adult entertainment aspect, whether it was feature dancing or clubs or what have you. I was always doing something in the space. So we'll say 30 years for that.
30 years. Okay. And what was that experience like for you? And how did you get into the world of adult entertainment?
The experience for me was very different than the experience that I witnessed today, right? I got into the business in the 90s. We were shooting on film. Things were a bit more glamorous. Things were a bit softer. Everything was about choice. We only shot one time a month. It was not the machine that ran the industry. It was just the little morsels of things that you did to keep your name alive, to get you out doing events and being at clubs and doing all of these things. I got into the industry by being at a club for 2 years, from 18 to 20, that had performers, stars, magazine models, actresses coming through weekly and feature dancing. And at that point, I'd already been dancing for a while. I knew that I wanted to continue dancing. I liked the money that I was making. I liked the situation that I was in. But I didn't love the game that had to be played when you were a regular girl at a club that had to get to know her customers. So there becomes a point of manipulation that I never liked. And it's something I never wanted to play into in the industry. So I had to really pivot and find my sweet spots. And when I saw these women coming through the club, I thought, oh, I could still do this, but I don't have to really get to know anybody. I don't have to play a game. I don't have to be super friendly to a guy that I know I don't like, but that I'm trying to get his money. Because to me, that was a manipulation layer that I knew I didn't have to do. I knew at that time, if I was pretty and then I smiled and I danced, I would make tips. That was all I really wanted. And these features came in and they got paid. These features came in, they were a limited option. They didn't have to stop and chat as long. And I was like, this is it. So I started interviewing them. So for 2 years, I sat down, whoever would talk to me, I talked to. Christy Canyon's still a friend of mine to this day. Christy, answer all my questions. What things do I not want to do? What things do I want to do? How do I get on the box cover? How do I get a contract? 2 years. And during that time, I was hiring photographers. I was mailing photos to California. I was waiting for them to mail me back, long distance phone calls. That 2-year span of studying the industry as it was then is very different than if somebody were to study the industry as it is now.
What are some of the differences?
The biggest difference is your ability to choose everything that you're doing. I think when there were less women getting into the industry, we were treated like, oh, we don't want you to leave. How can we keep you here? What can we do? And so it was from choosing your performers to choosing what types of scenes to everything was a choice. Now I meet performers that are new to the industry and they tell me that their agents say, oh, you can't choose who you work with. You can't choose what you do. You can't choose. You do everything. There's agents we know that when you sign with certain agents, you have to do everything. And when I mean everything, I mean potential sexual experiences that they have not had yet in their personal lives.
Yeah.
They're going to do on camera with a stranger for an amount of money
Yeah.
that can be triggering or jarring or just not something they're prepared for.
Mm.
So when I got in, it was this kind approach to what have you done in your personal life? Would you like to do that on camera?
Mhm.
To this now, it's like, well, if you don't do all of this, no one's ever going to like you or no one's ever going to hire you. It was like
Right.
this all or nothing is what I see now that's very different.
It's almost like back then they treated people like human beings, and now it's just you're an object.
You're an object. Definitely, that is
Mhm.
so true. It was a feeling of being a human being, and it was a
Mhm.
feeling of being a part of a business where you mattered.
Yeah.
You got to meet the artwork department.
Mhm.
You met the people that packaged your movies. You looked at yourself and the community that you were involved in as you were part of this family that kept everything working. And because of you, other people made money as well. And so
Yeah.
there was a sense of pride in
Yeah.
that was very different.
Mhm.
Shooting on film meant everybody had to be so dedicated and had to be paying attention. So people didn't party on set. I
Mhm.
remember my first run of movies of never seeing anybody drink or do drugs or do anything because there's 40 people there and there's a lighting crew and there's a sound crew and everything mattered. And if you messed that synergy up, then everybody lost all of their work and all of
Mhm.
their money. And
Mhm.
it wasn't disposable like it is now. There weren't
Yeah.
30 companies shooting 100 scenes a week.
Right.
There were 30 companies shooting one movie a month.
Wow. So, you shared in your book, which I've read, The Life Back, and I love it. It was honestly a book that I kid you not, I could not put down. You have a very interesting life and a very interesting story, and you wrote it so well that I was very intrigued the entire time. So, I really enjoyed your book, and you talked about how your family was a contributing factor as to why you maybe got into the industry. And then, as you've gained a lot of success in the industry, it's also kind of hindered your relationship with your family. And I want to share that because there may be somebody out there that maybe out of desperation, they want to get into the adult film industry. Or maybe, they're going through something right now where they're in the industry and, their relationship with their family is hindered. Can you talk about that?
Yes, it's a very tough situation when you don't have unconditional love in your family, right? No matter
Mhm.
what, we all want unconditional love. That is the number one, the foundation of what we're brought here to do and share with each other. And so for me, I would like to say that I think my parents did the best they could in the 70s going through a divorce, which
Mhm.
was still, we weren't living in divorce culture yet.
Yeah.
And my dad coming from a large Italian family that was very looked down upon. So there was this constant fight, and my parents were so struggling through their divorce, and there was this back and forth pull and this constant chaos that put me in a very insecure and unsure of state.
Mm.
The things that I saw my father doing, which
Mhm.
was quitting his job and working under the table so he didn't
Mhm.
have to pay child support to spite my mother. And
Wow.
then I'd get my mother who completely, of course, is doing the best that she can, but she's
Mhm.
working three jobs. We never see her. We're home alone all the time. And then she's a bit bitter.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
there's this jaded conversation I get from her
Mhm.
about how I should be looking at men.
Mm.
Then there's this thing I get from my father about what a horrible woman my mother is because she broke up a family and got divorced. Like this bit of chaos. And so it put me in a space of influx as a young person.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people go through that because parents are just people.
Yeah.
There's no handbook. You can mess it
Mhm.
up.
Mhm.
And so when you're in that state as a young woman and you're trying to find your footing, you're going to lean towards something where you feel you fit in. And when you've been outcasted from your rest of your life because you don't fit in, because maybe for me growing up, most of my friends, their parents were still married.
Mm.
My first real sense of shame that I felt in life was as a young girl. Between 6 and 10 years old, I think was my most amount of unexplained shame that I didn't uncover till therapy years later. And it was from my dad's side of the family who would spend time with me telling me what a horrible mother I had because she broke up a family unit. How could she do that? My
Oh.
dad's mother, my grandmother, was the only person that didn't say nasty things. She would
Mhm.
wait till nobody was around. She'd ask about my mom.
Mhm.
So I had this thing. And in this small town of Easton, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, My family on my dad's side was very active. My aunt and uncle had a bakery, like they had things. We were kind of shunned.
Mhm.
My mom was shunned from going into certain businesses. My
Wow.
mom was treated like an outcast. We were treated like outcasts.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my mom let us see my dad every Sunday. I didn't know he didn't give her child support till much later in life.
Wow.
So she had the grace
Mhm.
to still keep this unit going, but that led to a lot of uncertainty in my
Right.
life. And that was the foundation I didn't have that didn't allow me to make better choices.
Yeah.
And I went for the quick thing that
Mhm.
was going to feed me easiest money fastest so that
Mhm.
I could take care of myself, because my biggest fear was going into a situation like my mother lived, being with a man that gave me children and that wouldn't give me support, being in a married into a family that then turned on me. That was my biggest fear. So I felt building my own personal wealth would be the first way for me to not end up in that situation.
Yeah, I have a similar story to that too. And for me, it was like I when I went off to college, I started dancing and then got into the adult film industry because I just didn't want to end up back at home. That was my biggest fear, is like, I'm not going to make enough money and I'm going to end up back at home. So I did whatever I could. And I know a lot of women in the industry have stories. When I was in the business, I was always curious, like, why'd you choose
Yeah.
this? Because
How'd you get here?
I think at the core of me, I knew that if I was a wholehearted, healthy individual, I wouldn't have chose that path, right? And now we're seeing so many women, as of lately, even we've lost a lot of friends to overdoses and women that have taken their lives. And there's just clearly a mental health crisis in the business. I even read the other day that the average expected lifespan of an adult film star is 37 and a half years old, whereas with the average American, it's 78.1 years old. Why do you think that there's such a mental health crisis in the business?
Well, let me just say that number, 37 and a half years old. In 2015, I did my own research and it was 39 years old in
Mm.
2015. That's how much the crisis has affected us.
Mhm.
You know, I think there's many reasons why we're having this crisis. And I'll just go first to the industry. The industry itself, we all know you have to be so steadfast to your convictions when you get in. And
Mhm.
you have to be willing to every day almost be risking whether you're going to stay. And for me, it was battling with people who I knew were not good, people who would bring drugs into a situation, people who had alcohol on set, people who would be trying to ask me to do things I didn't want to do. And I think now there's so much more competition in this pool. There's new people coming in every day. We're in this complete toxic culture of young women waiting until they turn 18. The first thing they want to do is start an OnlyFans. That
Mhm.
is not healthy. That is not good. That is not where we should be headed. And sadly, some of these people came from families who provided them more than you and I had.
Yeah.
Had I had a better family unit, this would not have been the path I took.
What would you have done?
Many years ago, I said I would have been a sports agent, but you have to be a lawyer. Now that I
Yeah.
know myself,
Uh-huh.
I would have done anything.
Mhm.
A nurse, a teacher, a worker at it doesn't matter. I now know myself enough to know that as long as I was connecting with people, that I'd be good.
Yeah.
But as for this mental health crisis in the industry, the most toxic part of the industry is the industry. It is not the outside of the industry. It is the inside of the industry. These are catty, judgmental, mean, fierce bullies. And they are so toxic that they break people one at a time. August Ames is a great example of that. Rest
Yeah.
in peace.
Yeah.
A great example of
Mhm.
that level of toxic.
She was bullied online.
Bullied online, bullied
Mhm.
online,
By
told
performers.
by performers
Mhm.
from within the industry because she chose to not work with somebody,
Yeah.
which again proves what I said earlier about choice
Yeah.
being removed, whereas that was not the case when I first got in. So I think the inside is very difficult. Now you get past that and you got to go to the outside. What people don't realize is how much more difficult your life is when you're in the industry. As simple as going to rent an apartment. Okay, now you meet with the super. Okay, he's a fan. Okay, so you can't do that apartment. Great. You find another building. Okay, he's not a fan. Guess what your neighbor is? There are so many layers to what you're constantly having to manage that it becomes heavy.
And these aren't just like regular fans. Like if you had done maybe a Hollywood movie or something, like when somebody is a fan of adult films, there's a different level of obsession that comes with it because they feel like they have actually had intimate moments with you even though they've only seen you on camera.
And they obviously they
Mhm.
also feel entitled to more.
Right.
They feel very entitled. And I think that entitlement has changed once it became right here on your phone. You could watch
Mhm.
us. Because in the 90s, when I would be recognized, it was very different.
Mhm.
A man would, I remember a man recognized me one day in the mall when he was with his wife, and he noticed me and he just looked down and looked away. And that was a lot of what it was. They
Yeah.
would get almost a guilty, like, oh, I know who you are. And they would look away
Mhm.
because they knew there was an action that they had to take. They had to go to an adult bookstore. They show their ID. They either rented it or purchased it. It was a once in a while thing. People didn't have this like sense of pride for masturbating that they had to go and tell everyone, oh, this is my favorite. Oh, this is my favorite. No, those were indoor things.
Yeah.
Sexual preferences can still be kept private. We don't have to share everything we do with the world.
Yeah.
Though that sounds strange coming from me, someone who
Mhm.
did that, I'm talking about in our personal lives. And so that fan that feels very different towards you, it's jarring. And sure, there's some fans that are just cool. Hey, I liked your work, fine, walk away. But then there's others that are obsessive and they'll argue with you. Well, why won't you have sex with me? You've had sex with money. Everyone thinks once you've done a scene that they can offer you money to have sex with you.
Yeah.
You are now for purchase.
Yeah.
So when you do decide to hop onto OnlyFans at 18 years old and you do decide to enter into this space, please take a pen and paper and write this list of things that you're going to be up against and weigh it out. Is there going to be enough money there for you to weigh out all of these things? I'll give an example. I had the same neighbors for 3 years in my building. And I just recently got new neighbors. And I love my building so much. And so I said on my show to my co-host Brett, I said, Brett, I just got new neighbors, so I might have to move. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if the neighbor is a super fan and realizes who I am and wants to talk to me about it, I have to move. I will not feel safe sleeping. And he was like, whoa, I never thought of that. Guess what? That's the rest of your life.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
rest of your life.
It's wild, just the amount of. I actually would love to talk about parasocial relationships on that note because there are so many people that they're purchasing onto OnlyFans, and then like, how do you feel like it's affecting the consumer?
Oh, that is a whole nother layer. The parasocial relationship for the consumer. A lot of people on OF have teams running their page.
Mm-hmm. Let's say that again, because a lot of times when people are purchasing a subscription to OF, the reason why they're doing it is because they're like, yes, I get to connect with my favorite, adult star, or my favorite Instagram model, but you're not actually talking to the model, you're talking to her team.
Yeah. 1,000,000%. And also, it's very easy. Is she going to be available to answer your messages 24 hours a day? There's a problem. So you can just check it.
Yeah.
Send one at 9, see how quickly it gets responded to. Go back at noon, see how quickly. 3, 6, 9, and midnight, and you'll have your answer. She has a
Mhm.
team. And
Mhm.
guess what? It's probably a guy you're talking to,
Mhm.
which is even worse.
Yeah.
But there's that connection that is now the parasocial relationship is an obsession that can be very toxic because it's fed in. It happens not just with adult stars, podcasters. I'm sure you read the story last year about the podcaster and her husband that were killed in their house by a fan.
No.
And they had called the cops multiple times, and her mom was staying at the home. And luckily, her mom got out to call the neighbors, but by then came back in. Her daughter, it's real. It becomes a one-sided obsession. Somebody watches someone. Look, I'm a fan of things and I can understand parasocial relationships because I'm such a fan.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I'm going to start messaging that person.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean I feel that that person should respond to me and owes me anything. It's just that I know the barrier. I know that any podcast Aaron Rodgers does, I will listen to because I love him on Aaron Rodgers Tuesdays on Pat McAfee. But that doesn't mean I'm going to meet Aaron Rodgers and go hang out with him. It just means I
Right.
enjoy it. When he pops up on my feed, I'm going to watch it. We've lost reality with that. And because we're living, especially post pandemic, in a much more lonely state,
Mhm.
we have now created this environment of we're feeding into this loneliness.
Mhm.
I spend more time asking my people to report back in with their dates, their plans, their where they're going. When did you touch the grass last? When are you
Mhm.
going to get off the internet? When are you going to cancel your membership? I'm not looking at this as
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help people. I'm just trying to get people to go. But I want to go back to something else that we didn't finish on, that I didn't get to finish on properly. This toxic, this really, really harmful state that the industry is in with loss.
Mhm.
There's no more off time. This 24/7 wheel that the internet has created is making there's no line of demarcation. So now we've got this, even though a team is running an OnlyFans, guess what? That team is telling that girl, I need 6 feet pics. I need 3 solo videos. I need this. I need that. So even though the fan might not be talking to that girl, boy, that girl is getting the work sent to her, and it's 7 days a week. And that in itself becomes toxic. I take one, I try for 2 days a week where I don't look at myself on a camera. I don't put makeup on.
Mhm.
I don't engage. I don't do live streams. I don't play into the internet. Those
Mhm.
are the days where I talk to my friends, where I get on FaceTimes with my friends. I go and walk my neighbor's dog. I do the things that I want to do that everybody else doesn't need to know about. But
Yeah.
I think this wheel of it's going, it's going, it's going in the back of everyone's mind,
Yeah.
it's just creating a toxic amount of a girl having to be in makeup 7 days a week, creating sexy content 7 days a week is toxic. There should be 2 days a week. You shoot everything you're going to shoot. And
Mhm.
then the rest of your week should be spent with that content, doing what have you. But there's no more keeping everyone in the rails of like you go to work and you go home and you
Yeah.
stop being that other person. You've got to stop. You've got to be yourself. You've got to have your own friends and your own life. And I think that is also creating another really fatal dose of toxic energy in the industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's absolutely no separation. It seems like I know when I was in the business, I was working. I mean, I remember one time working like 70 days in a row until I caught gonorrhea, and then I had to take a couple days off, not by my will, but because I was forced to with an STD. And I just see that happening. Like I read a story just recently about a girl who was an Instagram model, an OF model, and she's now sitting in a prison cell because she stabbed her boyfriend to
Yes.
death.
Yes. Yes.
And
And
there
at first, by the way, she did not go directly to jail. And this was a very messed up case from the jump.
Mhm.
And I don't want to play the race card, but at the same time, I do, because this boy who she had been with, immediately she flew to Hawaii to go to rehab. And her family was like, oh, he'd been beating her this whole time. Then the neighbors come, like, these two fought like crazy people all the time.
Mhm.
There was a lot of erratic behavior there, and
Mhm.
what a violent way to kill someone.
Mhm.
And the fact that she didn't go to jail right away was disappointing, but his family did really fight for them to look further into this. I'm glad that they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I see stories like that, it just reminds me that, when I was young and impressionable and I would look at women in the adult industry, I would think, oh, like I was very insecure, very, I had a lot of self hatred. And I would see these women that would really say that adult work was empowering and that it was glamorous. And that's like, for me, it was like, that's everything that I want to be because these women are being praised. Like, men love these women. Really, they were lusting over the women because how can you love somebody that you don't know, right? And so they're like lusting over these women. And I'm thinking, like, I want that because if I can get these people to notice me, then I'll somehow be validated and I'll somehow feel like I found acceptance in life. And then you hear stories like that OF model who now is sitting in a prison cell. Some of the women that I looked up to the most when I was 16 and just seeing where they are in their lives now, it's really heartbreaking. And I know that you do caution women to stay, to really think about their decisions before getting into the industry. And I would challenge them as well to really think about the future. Do you want to have children? Do you want to get married? Because it does like lower the dating pool. It could affect my children. I don't know because they're not at that age yet. But what if somebody shows them a scene one day? And these are all the things that I didn't think about, all because I was in such a place of like brokenness, all because I was so insecure and just wanted to be noticed. What would you say to a young girl? A dad actually told me recently, he goes, I feel so bad for some of my son's circle of influence because some of the girls are juniors in high school and they're saying, I can't wait to turn 18 to post on OF. And that breaks my heart. Like, how would you speak to a girl that's thinking like that today?
It's such a heartbreaking thing and it's so normalized. But here's what we've done: we've allowed young people to be just sucked in by social media and by these fake lives that everyone puts out there and by these, filtered photos and this glamorous everything. We've allowed society in America to think that what matters is how many followers you have, you're clout chasing, all of these things. And then the next step is now all these guys are watching everybody on OF. I want to be like this too. And at 18, it's so hard to tell someone not to do something they want to do. But to make a list of all the variables you just listed would be the best thing to do. And you could just start with the unknowns. Do I want to get married? Do I want to have a family? What kind of career may I want to have? All of the unknowns, because guess what? You can cross through most of them as being something unknown to being something maybe not obtainable, harder to obtain, or impossible to obtain once you've exposed yourself. I also would want to remind everyone that everything you post on OF or any platform is going to be lifted and put on tube sites, and it's going to be stolen. And though you can send all day long trying to chase your content, you're going to be just treading water. So now, with the pool of the amount of people that sign up for OF or other platforms every day, you have to ask yourself, how much money do you think you're going to make every month that is going to make this worth it? Because if you weren't a big star in the industry and you didn't have a brand, you're probably going to make $1,000 a month. The average OF user right now is making $800 a month.
Okay.
And that is before taxes.
Yeah.
But I brought up a social media thing, the news. Now, I don't know if these are planted stories, but the news does nothing but glamorize OnlyFans because everybody that's making
I've
millions of
seen
dollars,
that.
and what they're doing is, and it's like a pyramid scheme, right? It's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, yes, this teacher from St. Louis, she was the last one, lost her job.
Yeah.
She's teaching, she's making this much money. Her husband reaches out to somebody, oh, we're projected to make 7 million this year. Can you give us advice? Here's your advice. Save everything you make in the first 90 days because by the time the 100th day comes, another teacher is going to be fired. She's going to be the news story of the month, and you guys aren't going to make nothing.
Yeah.
And you have kids, and you gave up a career, and you gave up pension, and you gave up everything. You got none of that.
Yeah.
So you erase 30 years potentially of your life to go and make this cash grab.
Right.
Save all of it. That's a thing. And so I would advise everyone to also sit with the 5 people in their life that matter the most. 5 people. Mom and dad, or maybe it's just mom, or maybe it's just dad. Best friend, brother, sister. 5 people. Go to 5 people and openly say, this is what I'm considering doing. And ask them for their feedback. Because those people that love you are going to play devil's advocate and they're going to give you both sides. Now, if somebody just says, yes, you should go for it, then you still have 4 other people to balance out that. But this is when you have to go to what I call my board of directors.
Yeah.
Your board of directors are those 5 people. Those people are going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Then do the research and find out how much money these people are really making. Again, the average OF user is making $800 a month, which means after taxes, they're getting about $550. That is what, $120 some dollars a week. For that, they're now not able to go to work at Whole Foods because guess what? As they're checking bags, which by the way, Whole Foods is a great company to work for. After so many hours a week, you get 50% off all of your groceries. I have quite a few moms that do just the part-time so they can get the groceries. It's a great thing to do, but you're going to have a fan that walks up to you.
Yeah.
And guess what? That fan's going to wait in the parking lot for you. So if you're willing to live off of $800 a month and not work anywhere else, that's your choice. But I don't know where you're going to live in the US.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to cell phone. You're not going to have Wi-Fi. You're not going to have anything. So stop allowing yourself to fall into the news story where you believe you're going to be that next person. that makes $1 million.
Yeah.
Sure, you saw the story with the mom that decided she thinks she should have a sticker on her car promoting OnlyFans at school. What are you people doing to us? To the people that were in the industry for years and kept our private lives private. We didn't shove it in anyone's face. We didn't put posters in our windows. That was so inappropriate of her. And what's happened is because it's so easy to sign up, you're not meeting other people in the industry. So you're not getting to hear the horror stories. You want to put a sign on your car so somebody can follow you home when you have children? You want to have that car out front of your house so a fan can find you? You do not know, because the news does not tell all of those stories, what horrible things could happen.
Yeah.
And it's not an 18 and up school. Why are you advertising a product? It would be no different than if an alcohol or a cigarette rep was promoting cigarettes and alcohol, government regulated things,
Yeah.
gambling, cigarettes, alcohol, adult content. Why is that? Because it's supposed to be for adults,
Yes.
not children. And this
Mhm.
mom, these are the people that put the industry at a lower form than ever because they're coming in for the cash grab and they're not understanding how bad they're making everybody else look. No, no, no. You don't need to promote your OF page on school property. That is
Right.
awful.
Right. You put yourself and your family in danger, and then you expose young children who may have never looked at OF. Oh, what's this link on your mom's car? Let me check it out really quick. And now they're discovering things that they shouldn't be discovering
And the
either.
other
So,
teachers and parents.
yeah.
Are you wanting the parents to watch you as
Right.
well? Like, you're
Right.
advertising this. Why?
Yeah.
Most of us would want to keep it private.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's no shame nowadays because it is OF is really glamorized. I really do see that. And when we talked 5 years ago, I interviewed you for another podcast that I had. And you it was OF was still kind of new. It was still coming out, and I know that you said that you had really liked the direction in which it was going, that it was allowing women to be like entrepreneurs and not have to work for everybody. But as of lately, I have been seeing some very large like 1%ers on OF coming out of the business. They're getting baptized and saying how dark the industry was. I don't have a lot of experience with OF because it wasn't around when I was around. And I would love to know if your thoughts have changed now also. Because, like, for me, I'm seeing all these women leave and saying that it's actually very dark.
It
Wasn't in the
has
business.
gotten very dark. And
Mhm.
that's why I cancel so many new people and I block them permanently.
Mhm.
Think about the awful things that people say on social media, and now they're behind a paywall.
Mm.
So now they feel that they can verbally abuse you and say horrible things to you. They can be demanding. And I understand that's why a lot of the performers don't want to check their messages. But I think if they were checking their messages, they'd have the finger on the pulse of themselves,
Mm.
saying, this makes me uncomfortable. Why am I catering to this? Because if your message person tells you to cater to that guy and you do the photos he wants, now you've won over that nasty guy. It's dark. And I also think when OF first came about and these platforms first came about, they were all being very good about protecting our content.
Mhm.
And now you can just put in OnlyFans leaks on Reddit. You can put in OnlyFans leaks on Twitter. You can put in OnlyFans leaks and get everyone's duplicate page. So
Mm.
I think for a lot of people who thought I had this safe place, it's now no longer a safe place. I think because at first there were only a couple thousand users, now there's millions of users. And I think there's a lot of abusers in there. There's a lot of people in there. I'm probably their biggest problem because I create a ticket
Mm.
probably 100 times a week
Mm.
on messages that are inappropriate. I had a guy ask me to pull a couple of my teeth and sell them to him.
Whoa.
And oh yeah, they're asking for body parts, they're asking for bones, they're asking for organs, they're asking for all of it. And what infuriates me is not only did I work at a dentist office through school, and I know that if I take some out, they're all going to move, and not that I'm planning on doing this, okay? But what worries me is someone who's desperate that is.
Mm.
What worries me is this person being able on the platform, finding the new girl who is desperate and who will sell some teeth. So I report those things. They violate the policy. I do try and do that, but I know other people aren't.
Yeah.
So we're not monitoring it as we should.
Mhm.
But it is also a toxic reminder of the men out there that have not only parasocial relationships, but incels. And I think a large population of residents on these platforms are incels. And, incels are,
What does that mean, incels?
an incel is an involuntarily celibate man.
Oh, okay.
And in 2023, in March, the FBI came out and said that our biggest terror threat in the United States is incels. And incels, in my opinion,
Mhm.
have a direct correlation with pornography.
Mhm.
And I've also done the research on this. So, young men develop empathy between 10 and 14 years old. What we've done is we've replaced those years with video games, and that's how it started. So now they're killing people on video games. And then you get the companies, browsers, all these companies that now have a way to throw in little links on these video games.
Oh, yeah.
So, parents out there, you need to know that your gaming device is connected to these platforms driving traffic, and that these young men are now getting addicted to the adult content. And what
Mhm.
happens is when they leapfrog into their hormones and starting to do things and starting to feel that dopamine release and getting addicted,
Mhm.
they develop very quickly, but they skip those formative years. So they now have erased the time where they will develop empathy.
Mm.
An incel is definitely no empathy. Incels have been linked to all of our school shooters. And all of those school shooters, what else they've been linked to? Pornography.
Yep.
They have gotten addicted very young. Then that replaces the video game. Their parents don't know it. They're in the room. That's what they're doing. And ironically, recently in New York City, we've been faced with the fact that women are getting punched in the face.
I have been seeing
This is
that.
a normal thing now, and our news is not covering it anymore because New York wants tourists. So I live there. It's still happening.
Wow.
And now the word is that this is a dark web activity, and it's
Mhm.
incels are paying homeless people on Cash App because they get off watching women get beat up, because they hate us because they can't get us. So
Wow.
the incel population is a population of men that started watching adult content so well they threw off their own glands, they're off development, they're off connection. And then these are probably also young men that are missing a connection with their family,
Mm.
their parents, less hugs, all of these things. But
Mhm.
they are fiercely scary. I had to completely eliminate Dudes Do Better, a podcast I was doing,
Mhm.
and delete all of it from my YouTube channel and scrub it from the internet
Mhm.
because I was getting death threats for 6 solid months from incels, because Dudes Do Better was kind of like me calling out dudes that would say dumb things on social media, dudes that would send dumb emails, and they all rallied against me. And it was so fearful that I just realized I'm going to have to delete all of this content and get rid of all of this because I'm bringing them towards me in a way that I just didn't want.
And they're so protective over those things. I notice when I speak out against pornography that people like they fight me on it.
Oh, they fight me. They fight me every time I talk to you.
I've
Every time I
seen
talk to
it.
you, they hate
I've
me.
seen it.
Every time I talk to you, but they do. They are fiercely protective of, think
Mhm.
about it. This is the only world they know.
Yeah. It's so sad.
It's the only world they're getting attention, and it's the
Mhm.
only world that's making them feel some sort of emotion. And
Mhm.
now these are also men that are invaluable, no value at all to women, because they hate women because they
Mhm.
can't get women. They punch themselves in the face to develop scar tissue, to develop their chins, because they never develop properly, because at 10 years old they should not be watching adult content, and they are. And because they start doing their business and masturbating instead of developing, they throw off their hormones that they don't get a chin. And you can see it when they show the photos of the mass shooters. They all have that same trait of just this really narrow face line. They don't develop. Kids are supposed to develop in quadrants of time,
Yeah.
and they should not be watching this content at 10.
Mhm.
I just did a speaking engagement at Temple. 50 students were surveyed. The average age they watched their first content was between 10 and 11 years old.
Yeah.
My heart broke.
I know. It is devastating.
At 10 or 11, I was like, are we playing basketball today? Are we playing catch? What are we doing?
I
Okay.
know. And I was out there like guess I'm going to get picked last today on this dodgeball field because I wasn't very athletic, but at least I was still
But you were
playing.
out. You were out.
Exactly.
You were out.
It's really devastating. I often say that what the adult world does is it normalizes perversion. People like you can always tell when somebody is an avid watcher of adult films because they just talk differently.
Yes.
They think so differently, and they think that it's okay to objectify people. They think that it's okay to just bash and belittle people. And it's like you can tell where that's coming from because a lot of that is coming from the adult industry. I've had guys reach out for, things that I've done in my career about like, I can't remember what they call it, but it's like the belittling of men. And so they blame me for, and I will take full responsibility. I apologize. I was a broken woman making broken decisions. But they will sit and blame me for all of their insecurities. And I'm like, but just the way that people think in the biz that watch adult entertainment, or if you want to call it entertainment, it's really sad
And
the way that it
also
changes their mind and the way they think. And
think about this, what I brought up earlier about going into a store and getting a VHS or renting something, whatever. People did this for an hour or two a weekend. That was it. That was the amount of content that people consumed. That was normal. It was a little outlet. It was a little extra in life. That's what it's supposed to be. Cigarettes, alcohol, gambling. Like this was all regulated for a reason. I just think it's too easy to consume and there's too many hours. I think everyone should have some sort of a regulator where it's like you're only allowed to watch this for so many hours a day because that mushes the brain to a degree that they can't communicate normally. I started doing this ask me anything chat on my OF. Just sit there, dress, ask me anything. And so I do about an hour once a week. And what I've learned is how social skills have been diminished by kinks and by perversions. And so when I'm speaking with someone, and I'll go with feet, there's a big foot fetish thing. Okay, great. But if a guy brings it up a bunch of times, I say to him, let me ask you this. How many times would you go out with someone before you brought this up? Oh, I want them to know right away. Why? Don't you want to know her? What you're doing is demanding that a kink that you have is acknowledged because that makes you feel seen. And you're demanding that the person you're with fulfills this kink when really anything that you do intimately with someone else should be a joint decision.
Absolutely.
And just because you love something doesn't mean you need to have it all the time. I love chocolate cake, but I know I can't have chocolate cake all the time. So there's no boundaries. I think people need to regulate how much they're consuming, just like you should regulate how much time you're on social media, how much time you watch TV. All of these things should be regulated and they're not. And it's creating this overwhelming, disturbing guilt of who's more responsible here.
Yeah. And I would personally advise people not to watch it because studies show that adult films, the way that it affects the brain, it releases the same amount of dopamine as using cocaine. And so a lot of people, like, they just constantly chase that rush of dopamine. And then there is a blocker that people can put on their phone that has accountability software. And I mean, we have been on the opposite end of being the accountability for somebody and just them watching 8 hours, 13 hours, where it is really like where I've just been shocked. Like, you just go on a full bender because it's like, I remember when I would use cocaine and I would start off with just a teeny little bump, and then I went to a line and then bigger lines. And then I got to the point where I couldn't even use the drug anymore because I wouldn't even get high. It was an instant come down because I'd stay up for days at a time on it. And people utilize the adult industry for the same exact thing. They sit there and they're like, okay, I'm watching and this isn't filling me anymore. So now I need to go to 3 hours and 4 hours. Or, you know what, these morally acceptable scenes aren't filling me anymore. So now I'm going to go into the abuse and this. And I was on Reddit the other day and
such a scary place.
Okay, but I was actually intrigued by some of the conversations because there were women coming out saying, hey, what do I do? My husband or my boyfriend, when I'm sleeping, I wake up to them doing things to me because they've developed these fetishes from things that weren't filling them in the legal realm of the adult work, but they've now gone to the dark web. And now the dark web is creating these appetites in them to do things that are highly inappropriate. Just further,
heartbreaking.
It is.
for somebody with their partner.
It is.
Because
Somebody
that's
you're
a
supposed to
problem.
trust.
That's a problem. And it's
Yeah.
not something that it's that easy to just leave somebody. I mean,
Yeah.
it's no different than if somebody goes and gambles away the family savings.
Yes,
This is a
exactly.
problem.
Mhm.
And this is a problem that now both people have to contend with. And it
Yeah.
could disrupt a whole family unit. There could
Yeah.
be children. And now someone has to go out and raise their children alone because of
Yeah.
something like this.
Yeah.
It's a level of toxic right now. And also, back to the news celebrating these earners. When did we start doing that?
Mm.
Did the news ever stop and say, oh, Jesse, Jane, Pirates of the Carib, they made this money? No, they never
Mhm.
cared about us.
Yeah.
They never propped anybody up. But now we're doing this, which I think is a trigger for some people. So here's the guy that's been a couple of weeks without looking, and
Mhm.
he's reading his news and now is triggered.
That's a really good point.
We are doing this to our society. We are in the worst propaganda state our news has ever been in since I've been alive, 1972. It is crazy what we want people to know about and what we don't want people to know about. This does not need to be talked about. And I understand news wants it for algo. It's clickbait. We're using everything for clickbait now, but there's no way to get it out of your feed. And for somebody who is struggling, that would be really tough. You don't see drugs being spoken about that way, alcohol or cigarettes. I just read the other day a country's making it illegal to smoke cigarettes if you were born past like 1996 or something. Like they're doing
Wow.
things but we're not talking about those things in the news, so those people
Yeah.
aren't being triggered. We are
Right.
triggering people into. That's why I wonder if some of these stories are planted.
And it could be. It could be. Really, truly. And I think too, like even with cigarettes, like many years ago, it was like my old boss, my first job out of the porn industry. She would tell me how cigarettes were so normalized that she, after giving birth, she could smoke a
Oh my
cigarette in
gosh,
the
they used to smoke
hospital.
where they were pregnant
Right.
in
And
elevators.
yeah. And so I see that, like how the change has happened because you see more people getting cancer. And I see this happening with the adult industry. When I got in, I didn't hear about, marriages. Like there's statistics now that 60% of marriages end in divorce because pornography was a determining factor in that divorce.
That's
And
hard.
I think now people are starting to become a little bit more outspoken. And so I definitely appreciate that because it could definitely change the trajectory of things, As you've evolved from the adult industry, I want to know what are some of maybe the hardships that you've faced since leaving the adult industry behind?
Everything you do becomes incredibly more difficult after you've been in the adult industry, especially if you were popular. So for myself, being popular is great, but it really isn't. You know what I mean? Because you're only popular in this thing. For me, it was about being popular to save money to provide myself with a secure future. But everything is more difficult. I work very hard to be sure that everyone knows what type of person I am. That doesn't define me. But I don't know many people that would be willing to work as hard as I have and as hard as you have to be defined by something other than what we did.
Well, it's hard.
It is
It's not
hard.
easy.
It's not easy. I did 10 years straight of sports radio and now have ventured into the comedy space. But in that 10 years of sports radio, I could not let anybody discourage me. I also had to do things that I'm going to work twice as hard as somebody else because I really want to prove that I'm good at this. I'm not going to get rich at doing this, but it was that grit. It was that just saying I could do it. It was just saying that I could show myself another way and be viewed another way. And what's cool is I've merged the two together finally, but it did take 10 years.
Yeah.
I merged the two together in a sense that now I host every Thursday night football at a strip club in New York City. But the guys that come in, I have this private area I sit that has this walkway by it. Every one of them just walks in, hands me their phone. Their fantasy football lineup is on it. They want me to work the waiver wire for the weekend. They want to make sure everything's good. We go through this thing. And so I've been able to continue relationships that, yes, may have started one way because they knew me from being in the industry. But the guys that want to talk to me now are smart enough not to talk to me about it. And they bring my new content.
Right.
Oh, we're doing sports now. Oh, we're doing this. And so that was 10 years of grinding that out. That wasn't handed to me. That was a moment of every day, 8 hours a day, listening to sports news, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Never missing an injury, always being available. I did, well, gosh, the money I made doing sports radio, I made in 1 month a year doing
Mm.
films and being on the road for a year.
Yeah.
10, but it wasn't about that. It was about proving that I am more than just one thing.
Right.
You have to have that tenacity. You have to have that money in the bank. You have to have friends outside of the business. You have to have things that interest you that do not have to do with yourself.
Right. Yeah.
And sports were a great escape for me because I'm not playing these games. Nothing
Mhm.
I do matters. I'm worried about somebody else's stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so
Yeah.
that was really fun.
Yeah.
I got to just lean into everybody else's family history. Oh, dad was a tennis player. Mom was this. Like, it was an escape. I don't know many people that have that kind of ability, that steadfastness to just say,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be knocked off.
Yeah.
People still said mean things to me. Every Sunday morning, I put out betting picks, and every Sunday morning, I religiously on a Sunday have to read horrible comments.
Mm.
I liked you better with this in your mouth. I liked you better when you were doing this. You're useless unless you have this on you. And I have to block, block, block,
Yeah.
block, block. There was a 2 year span when I first started where it was hard,
Yeah.
where I would cry,
Mm.
where it was dark. I didn't drink. I had no
Mm.
alcohol in my home. Whenever my life gets dark, I tell my friends it's no drinking phase because drinking is a depressant. It should only be done if you're celebrating something nice and you want to have a glass of wine. I gave up hard alcohol years ago. Some wine, no drinking. But I cried and I cried and I cried. And I had to get through that crying because I knew I wanted to continue to go on.
Yeah.
And now I've just gotten stronger. And
So, how has being in the adult industry impacted your dating life?
I mean, that's a question. It's not easy.
Mm.
Here you are in this beautiful marriage. I do believe that it is possible thanks to you,
Yeah.
but it's not yet been possible for me.
Mhm.
I did just end a 13-year relationship that was at times casual, at times not casual. And I just really realized last year how much more I would have wanted from this relationship. And since it wasn't growing or evolving, I felt stuck.
Mm.
And I don't know if I'll ever love anyone as much as I loved him, but at the same time, I have to love myself more and feel like if it's not evolving at that point in time, then it might be better to just close the door. So I'm finally out in the pursuit. Been speaking to a couple nice guys that were introduced to me through friends. I can't meet a stranger, obviously. I want to have a lot of conversation before I meet somebody for the first time. And I want there to be no sex involved to this friendship for quite a period of time. So that kind of turns people off. And I've gone on quite a few dates where I don't drink and we're on the third date and I haven't drank and nothing's happened yet. And I just don't hear from them again. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's okay for me because
Wow.
I've had a lot of sex. I don't need to just give this to you to see if I get you to stay.
Yeah.
If you're willing to stay, you're going to stay.
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting, not easy. And I'll keep working at it. Hopefully, one of these interviews will be reporting in with something great.
I would love that. I'd love to see a ring on your
I
finger
would
and
too.
watch you walk down the aisle. And there is a man that will wait because my husband and I didn't have sex until our wedding night.
I love that.
We waited.
How long were you
Yeah.
together before you got married?
We were together for about a year
I
and a
love
half,
that.
2
How
years maybe.
special was
2 years.
it?
Yeah, it was really special. Honestly, I felt like everything was renewed. I felt like I was brand new, like in the bedroom and everything. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's been because it was 3 years by the time I got married.
How
And so, yeah,
amazing.
so there's somebody that will
Yep.
wait. The right man will be willing to wait. The right man will be. And so I've recently learned about this phenomenon of like men not wanting to marry women with a high body count. What do you think about that?
I just learned about this too and was fascinated because I feel like as much as there's this judgment of this body count, I'm assuming all of these guys still want these Instagram models, these OF models. They want a girl that looks like this to kind of play with and add to her body count. But yet they want to know that there's this girl over here waiting that is not doing anything and not adding up to the body count. There could be a flip to this, though. This could be a conversation that could be very powerful. Think about questions that we answered and we talked about with somebody looking to maybe get into the OF or the industry. If you're looking at your life and you think you want to have children, you want to get married, maybe you put a little plan together. How's the easiest way to get there? I
Mhm.
don't think sleeping around is really the easiest way to get there.
It's not.
So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be a real good time for people to take a step back and say, what am I doing with my life and why? I am not judging anyone for being a sexual being if this is who you want to be. But if you want something different and you think that you want something more solid, I would say make more solid decisions. But what's interesting is these men asking this question are kind of asking a question that if they don't like the answer, they're going to be dissatisfied. I've always believed that sometimes no news is good news and that they maybe shouldn't be asking the question. But again, this is a great conversation starter for those that want to live a holier life, that
Yeah.
want to live a more whole, more grounded life, giving it away for whatever purpose, whether it was to spend time with somebody, whatever it may be, does add up.
Yeah.
And so you have to think about what you're giving away
Mhm.
each time you do it.
Yeah, and I love that you can speak out against it because even with me, like people will say, "Oh, you're just like judging women for doing the same thing you did." I'm like, "No. If I was a cigarette smoker and got cancer, I would be telling everybody, "Don't smoke cigarettes. It'll give you cancer." Right? So I'm out here speaking against it because I went through the pain. I know that it limits the dating pool. I know all of these things. Why? Because I lived that side of life and I've come out on the other side and I've learned a different way and I've learned the hardships that can come from having a high body count, from being in the adult industry, and so forth. Okay, so do you ever battle with shame now that you've gotten out of the adult industry? Does that ever haunt you?
Shame does not haunt me,
Mhm.
which I'm very fortunate for because I do know that shame haunts so many. But I think for me, being that the icebreaker of shame came into my life so young,
Mhm.
being that I was shamed by my own family because my mother decided to get divorced from my horrible father.
Mhm.
Not saying my mother's much better, but my father is horrible. Um, I really understood shame. And when your own family can shame you, any stranger coming in, you're just like, yeah, I'm not so sure. But shame is something that is reminding you that you don't feel great about something. So
Mhm.
I always say the best way to deal with shame is to think about what is it that's bringing you this shame? If it's already been done, obviously you can't change the past.
Yeah.
But do you want to prevent it from happening in the future? I'll give an example as you can remember doing these shows and seeing the same girl get drunk and be out of sorts every time. That same girl could just not drink at the next event and not have to feel the shame of everyone talking about her being drunk at the next event.
Mhm.
So these are times to be mindful. What is it that's making you feel this shame? How can you not welcome more of it into your life? How can you reward yourself for acknowledging that maybe something you did in your past makes you feel uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but the fact that you're a healthy being, the fact that you can be a good human being, the fact that you can help your community and do good things can help you balance out that emotion.
Mhm.
You know, when I was going through the darkest time, my first 2 years of doing just sports, leaving the industry, that was a time where shame was foisted upon me. And though I wasn't processing it as shame, I feel horrible for this. I was having to manage people foisting shame on me. And that was when I got really involved in doing charity work. Because I was like, okay, how can I channel this energy? I have this weird energy coming at me. I can't change it, but if I sit home and think about it, I might feel pretty awful. And what's done is done.
Yeah.
I'm not living with my head buried, but I am finding a way to push through this negativity and go on this arc of a higher power. And that's when I really got into charity work. And, you know, I just watched the Blue Zone documentary series again, which I watch regularly. And it's a reminder that people who live to be over 100 are usually very active in charity work.
Yes.
Their faith, their charity, their community are the things that really help them live to be that long.
Mhm.
So find something positive and also remind yourself to always keep an ongoing list of moments that embarrassed you that, okay, you're embarrassed and that's good because you knew it wasn't right.
Yeah.
Doesn't sit with you. But you won't do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that because even like in the Bible, it says that though the righteous fall 7 times, they get back up again, right? And it's like nobody's perfect. Even people that we may look at as like, oh, this is a righteous person, they're going to fall too. Like everybody falls. And the important thing is to really get back up again. And like, I love what you say. You cannot change the past. Like, you can't. And so if you've made decisions in your past that are making you feel shame, just you have to remind yourself that the past is in the past, but today's a new day to be able to walk in like a new life. God's mercies are new every single morning.
And help someone.
Yeah.
Do something to balance out that negativity.
that.
Go and help someone. Make some sandwiches and take into a homeless.
Mhm.
You've done this in San Diego. I do it in New York. Do something that gives you that charge, because we can always act out in a positive way instead of allowing the negative things to make our lives more negative. When people feel shame, they're more apt to go back to drugs. They're more apt to go back into a bad relationship, to go back to drinking. These are all the things we don't want.
Yeah.
So go and find a space that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Forgive yourself for your mistakes of the past, and just move forward and just constantly be moving towards that light. That light is what's going to get you everywhere you need to go.
That is such good advice. Thank you so much for coming on Uncensored today. I really appreciate you.
I love you.
I love you too. I like to pray for all my guests before I send them off. So can I pray for you before we leave?
Yes.
Okay. Father, we come before you in the name of Jesus. And Lord, I thank you for Lisa. I thank you, God, that you've just protected her all these years, Lord. Your hand has just been on her life, God. And I just pray, Lord, that you would continue to lead her and guide her with your spirit, God, that you would bless her life, that you'd surround her with angels, God, that you would just continue to use her, Lord, to be a voice to the broken. Use her to speak life over just women who are in need, God. I pray that you give her wisdom and discernment to be able to help people, God. And I just thank you, Lord, that this next half of her life is even going to be greater than the last half, God, because I believe that she has your spirit in her, God. There's just something so unique and so different about her. So just keep her close to you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I love you.
Love you more.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Uncensored with Brittni De La Mora. If you like this episode and you want to see more, please like, please comment, please subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.